Welcome back to Views with Hughes, agenda-free news. This is Jerome Hughes. Now, let's go ahead and get right into it. So, we got to talk about the Acolyte again, and guess what? Forbes has an article that points out the problem that is glaringly obvious to most of us for a while. Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm was absolutely right to cancel the Acolyte, which was also, as you know, approved by Kathleen Kennedy. Now, Kathleen Kennedy's leadership at Lucasfilm has consistently led Star Wars down the path that stray from its core audience. And you know what? This show is no different. You see, Kathleen Kennedy's approach led to poor writing, misguided casting choices, and even a complete disconnection from what made Star Wars great in the first place. Also, I'm going to have the article linked for you all below to go ahead and read it. And guess what? It is absolutely crazy. But I'm not here to mince words at all. You see, Kathleen Kennedy's latest flop was finally put to rest, and Disney finally did something right by pulling the plug on this mess. Now, the fan petition to bring it back, as you remember, it only proves just how right Kathleen Kennedy's critics were, and just how out of touch Kathleen Kennedy continues to be with the audience that she should be prioritizing. Okay, but let's simply break it down as well. Before we begin, please go ahead and smash the like button, share this video far wide across social media, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Now, let's continue with the video. The Acolyte, approved by Kathleen Kennedy, was supposed to be some sort of revolutionary take on the Star Wars universe under Kathleen Kennedy and her direction. But instead, this show from Kathleen Kennedy became another example of how Kathleen Kennedy's continuous failure to understand Star Wars. Now, Kathleen Kennedy, in her attempt to reshape the saga, ignored the fan base that built this franchise in the first place, like the families, lifelong fans, and the people who grew up with the original trilogy, none of whom had any interest in this direction. Now, Kathleen Kennedy and her obsession with, pushing a hyper-woke narrative that felt completely alien to the spirit of Star Wars showed yet again why her approach is failing. Now, the show itself got axed after lackluster ratings and reviews, proving that under Kathleen Kennedy, Star Wars continues to stray far from its roots. It wasn't just the result of the so-called toxic dude bros, as some of Kathleen Kennedy's defenders like to claim. It was simply because the show failed to resonate with its intended audience under Kathleen Kennedy's flawed guidance. Okay, now there's this, as you all know, petition that was floating around crying for Disney to bring back the Acolyte, which was approved by Kathleen Kennedy. Now, as of now, it's like back then it got like over 75,000 signatures. It sounds like a big number, but let's put that in perspective. Star Wars is one of the biggest franchises in the world with millions of fans globally. For a show supposedly representing the future of Star Wars under Kathleen Kennedy's vision, only 75,000, signatures is like a drop in a bucket. This tepid support reflects the larger disapproval of Kathleen Kennedy and her leadership. Meanwhile, petitions for other shows like Bridgerton or even a remake of Game of Thrones season 8 have garnered hundreds of thousands, even millions of signatures. Excuse me. It's a clear sign that the Acolyte, approved by Kathleen Kennedy, didn't even capture the hearts of the real Star Wars audience, highlighting yet another failure by Kathleen Kennedy. And that's something that everyone's gonna have to admit. But why is that? Well, because the Acolyte, which, as we all know, is approved by Kathleen Kennedy under Kathleen Kennedy's leadership, forgot who the audience was. See, Kathleen Kennedy has continually shown that she's more interested in pandering to social media than respecting the core fan base of Star Wars. Okay, now Kathleen Kennedy's version of Star Wars underestimates the importance of adventure, compelling heroes, and classic good versus evil dynamic that defined the original saga. Now, this isn't the first time Kathleen Kennedy has tried to appeal to a crowd that doesn't even buy the merchandise, doesn't even show up for the movies, and doesn't engage with the broader Star Wars universe in any meaningful way. Now, under Kathleen Kennedy, the focus has been, on creating something for everyone, but reality, Kathleen Kennedy and her approach created something for no one. Okay, and that's something that we're all going to have to be honest with. And this goes back to, something that Kathleen Kennedy and her team at Lucasfilm have consistently failed to grasp. Know your audience. It's as simple as that. Kathleen Kennedy should understand by now the people who buy the tickets, the toys, and the merchandise are the fans who have been there since the beginning. Okay, now Kathleen Kennedy's persistent misreading of the audience has led to a string of failures, including this latest flop. And Kathleen Kennedy and her leadership has basically been marked by a disconnect from the fan base, and canceling the Acolyte, which Kathleen Kennedy herself actually approved, was a rare acknowledgement that Kathleen Kennedy's direction for the franchise is not what Star Wars needs. Okay, now we can all remember all the glory days of Star Wars. Y'all remember the glory days of Star Wars, right? Back before Kathleen Kennedy started steering the ship, of course. Well, you had characters like Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, Han Solo, Chewbacca, heroes who fought against the overwhelming odds, who stood up for what was right. And it was plain and simple. It was effective, and it resonated across generations. Now, fast forward to today, and instead of inspiring heroes, Kathleen Kennedy hands us shows like The Acolyte, approved by herself, Kathleen Kennedy herself, that are more connected or concerned with deconstructing everything that made Star Wars fun and engaging in the first place. Now, there's a reason why shows like The Mandalorian, well, at least the first 2 seasons, have found success. It brought back that sense of adventure, those familiar themes of good versus evil, not just the nostalgia, and it respected the original fans, something that Kathleen Kennedy and her projects consistently failed to do. And this is a woman who always worked on George Lucas. And let's talk about Kathleen Kennedy's attempt to push diverse stories with The Acolyte. Okay, now she did this with other recent projects as well. It's not just the diversity itself that's the issue. It's Kathleen Kennedy and her blatant pandering and the lack of substance in her storytelling. You see, Kathleen Kennedy and her approach ignores the deeper needs of the audience in favor of superficial, changes that fail to go ahead and resonate or take. And for example, take Andor. It's a diverse show that tells a gripping, grounded story within the Star Wars universe without falling into the same traps as Kathleen Kennedy's other projects. Now, it does have a strong female characters, a diverse cast, and yet it feels more like Star Wars, according to many people out there, than The Acolyte, which was approved by Kathleen Kennedy, ever did. Now, that's because Andor respects the source material and its audience, a stark contrast to Kathleen Kennedy and her failed vision. Okay, but here we have it. The ongoing failures of The Acolyte from Kathleen Kennedy only highlight the broader issues under Kathleen Kennedy and her leadership at Lucasfilm. You see, Kathleen Kennedy has continually pushed a version of Star Wars that's out of touch with what the fans want. And under Kathleen Kennedy's watch, there's been this relentless push to reinvent Star Wars by tearing down the very foundations that made it great. And the fans also seeing Kathleen Kennedy and her direction turn iconic characters into shadows of them for themselves, and stories into preachy narratives that lack the heart of the original saga. And Kathleen Kennedy and her approach has left fans feeling disconnected as well as disenfranchised. Okay, now there's also petitions. The fact that the petitions don't change Kathleen Kennedy and Kathleen Kennedy's mind or the direction of the corporation like Disney, but they do reflect the audience's growing discontent with Kathleen Kennedy and her leadership. And guess what? The numbers don't lie. You see, The Acolyte, which coming from Kathleen Kennedy, didn't bring in the viewers, didn't sell the merchandise, and didn't even capture the spirit of Star Wars, all under Kathleen Kennedy's guidance. And you know what? With Kathleen Kennedy and her focus on pushing a narrative instead of crafting a compelling story has led to a series of missteps, and The Acolyte was just the latest example. Okay, but going forward, y'all heard about what Kathleen Kennedy said, and Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm need to take a long, hard look at their strategy. The failure of The Acolyte, which was approved by Kathleen Kennedy, unfortunately, should be a loud and clear message to Kathleen Kennedy. It's time to stop alienating the core fan base, especially with the High Republic crap. Now, Kathleen Kennedy has to understand that the audience wants a return to the timeless tales of heroism, sacrifice, and adventure that define the original trilogy, even if it means continuing the Skywalker trilogy. Now, Kathleen Kennedy's insistence on subverting expectations has consistently fallen flat, and guess what? It's high time she reconsiders her approach. But in the end, the cancellation of The Acolyte, approved by Kathleen Kennedy, is a small but significant step in the right direction. Now, Kathleen Kennedy's continued attempts to try and reshape Star Wars into something it was never meant to be have not gone unnoticed. Now, this is a win for fans who have watched Kathleen Kennedy taking, like, with going her own direction with growing concern and call to return to the roots of what made Star Wars special in the first place. Now, Disney got this one right, and now it's up to Kathleen Kennedy to learn from it, okay? Which we doubt she will, but if she's willing to listen. Now, it's also time for Kathleen Kennedy to acknowledge that Star Wars doesn't need to doesn't need a complete overhaul. It needs to get back to its core values. Now, Kathleen Kennedy's pursuit of a new audience has only driven the original fans further away. Now, Kathleen Kennedy's leadership has been marked by miscalculations and the failure of the Acolyte, which was approved by Kathleen Kennedy. And you know what? Actually, I may have to change my mind on that. It may need a complete overhaul, meaning she'll have to be gone. Okay. And this show from Kathleen Kennedy should serve as a reminder that, you know, the heart of Star Wars lies not in agendas, but timeless storytelling. Now, if Kathleen Kennedy truly wants to steer the ship back on course, well, she's going to have to start respecting the fans who built this franchise, or she risks, you know, basically destroying her own career altogether. Okay. So, yeah, that's about it in a nutshell. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Do you think that the whole brand itself needs a complete overhaul and everything? Or do you think that Kathleen Kennedy does have the opportunity to do it? I mean, I think she does have the opportunity to do it, but she's not willing to. Okay, so that's the issue right there. So let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Also, be sure to include any additional thoughts you might have on this particular topic. If you enjoy what I shared in this video, go ahead, smash the like button, and share far wide across social media. And if you haven't done so already and you enjoyed all the content that I put out there, go ahead, subscribe to the channel, click the bell notification so that way you'll be notified of future uploads and updates. Till then, peace.